Welcome to this week's GOvember episode of the Immanuel Baptist Church Podcast. Teams that traveled to Greenville, South Carolina, England, the Middle East, and New York City will be joining me to share their experiences, discuss how we can pray for our partners, and maybe even answer any questions you may have about joining us next year. We hope these stories encourage and challenge you to fulfill God's call for you to go and to make disciples. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's GOvember podcast episode. All right, Middle East team. Thank you all for joining us for the Missions Recap podcast. Man, we've been here about 20, 25 minutes, and we've already had some laughs, so I'm excited to record with you all. John, why don't you, since you led this trip this year, we've been saying it's the Middle East team, but now we're able to say the location.
Cyprus. Yep, so we went to Cyprus in October of 24, so just last month, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. Why don't you just start us off, kind of introduce your team. I know there's one missing and one that planned on going, wasn't able to. Go ahead and introduce your team and just give us an idea of what you guys were able to do.
Yeah, so this is Sean Sessnan, Chip Malone's across the way, as well as Carly Oldham, and then Wesley Scott is not able to join us this evening. He had wrestling practice. So, but we went to partner with our long-term church planning partners there, and just simply sought to live everyday life with them. So they had just moved to Cyprus a few months before we got there, and so in many ways we were helping them to get to know their new community, get to know the people that were in it, and so we engaged with Greek Cypriots, we engaged with retirees from the UK, we engaged with tourists from all over Europe, and then we also engaged with Syrian refugees. So,
and when you say Cypriots, yes. you said that at the launch the other week. It took me a second.
Yeah.
People from Cyprus.
People
right?
from Cyprus are Cypriots. They're either Greek Cypriots or Turkish Cypriots, depending on where their family's from.
Okay.
So,
cool.
The place where we were, they were predominantly Greek Cypriots. So we engaged with a lot of them, Syrian refugees, tourists, and then retirees from the UK.
Yeah.
So I ate more fish and chips while I was in Cyprus than I've ever eaten when I've been to the UK. It was wild how much fish and chips they had. It was good though.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, good deal. Yeah, the goal of these is just for you guys to have a platform to be able to share things that happened on the trip, share stories, things that God did, prayers that were answered. I'll just open it up. If anyone would like to share stories from the trip, your favorite thing about the trip, and just kind of in general some of the stuff that you guys were able to be a part of in Cyprus.
Well, I don't know. There's a lot. I'll be honest. Mine kind of occurred, and it's got to do with us as a group.
Yeah.
Mine kind of occurred on the way and during the whole trip. I was, I'll be honest, really nervous. Really, was my first mission trip probably in about 7 years, and I was kind of nervous being around a lot of people I really didn't know that well. It kind of reminded me of my very first mission trip I went on back in 2006. Yeah. And I was a little bit nervous about that, but my fears were kind of calmed, and just had a wonderful time with these group of people. I loved every bit of it. We had a lot of fun during the day, at night, and we really meshed well.
Yeah. And
that meant a lot to me. It calmed me and kind of had me kind of come out of my shell, I guess you could say. So, I was probably pretty quiet all the meetings prior to going. Just kind of there, like, oh man, am I going to get along with these people? How's it going to go? But after a while, it just worked out great.
That's awesome. So you said it had been a while since you've been on a mission trip.
It had been 7 years since the last one I'd been on in 2017.
Yeah. So when you saw the list of trips that we were planning on going on, what made you decide to go with the Middle East?
Well, it's funny. It's funny how God works. I'd always said, I'd go on mission trips and everything like that. Wouldn't mind going, but one place I would not go would be the Middle East.
There you go.
And then it was kind of like the first trip. I said, I didn't really want to go, and God just kept calling me for my very first trip. And and this one I was like, all right, I'll go wherever, but I will not go anywhere in the Middle East. And of course, that's where God wants me to go. Don't ever say you're not going somewhere. I can tell you that.
Yeah.
That's probably where He's going to send you.
Yeah.
So,
that's right.
But I loved it. I loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to going back.
That's awesome. Good stuff.
I also had kind of a similar experience with getting onto the trip. So it has been 13 years since my last out of the country mission trip. And Wesley Scott actually reached out to me, said that we were going on this trip to the Middle East, and he was curious if my husband and I were interested in coming on this trip. And I have a heart for missions. I immediately thought this is definitely something I want to do, but I want Hunter's yes to be his yes, not me saying yes for him.
Yeah.
So I told him that I'd talk to Hunter, and I did bring it up. He had a lot of questions about the Middle East and where specifically, and he seemed a little bit weary of it. And kind of when push came to shove, he landed in a space of, I don't feel confident enough to go and do a mission trip, which I absolutely respect, because I told him and I told Wesley, I don't want to make this decision for Hunter and him not get out of it what he could. So our specific prayer was either the Lord completely opened the door or completely closed it. So I told Wesley that I thought we were going to kind of sit this one out, and thank you so much for reaching out to me. Then fast forward to the second week of June. I was out at lunch with one of my good friends, and she was telling me she went to school at UT Southern in Pulaski and has made her home there for now, just got married, and they have a plan in the next year to go to Africa and be full-time missionaries.
Yeah.
And we were talking about it, and she was telling me a lot about kind of the mission that she's doing in Pulaski and how they are planting a church and doing home church and different things like that. And I had mentioned this opportunity that I was kind of bummed that the door had closed, but I knew that the Lord was good and faithful even when I feel let down.
Yeah.
And that I was trusting in his plan and that something else was going to happen, and I was just going to try to wait patiently for it. We left Los Compadres. We were at Los Compadres that day and went to the Marshalls to kill time, as you do. And I got a call from John while we're walking, and he said, I just don't feel like the Lord has closed this door yet.
Yeah.
Would you be interested in meeting so we can talk about this? So we met that night before church, and one of the first things that he talked about was home church. And I just thought, how funny is it that the Lord planted that idea for me when I was talking to Aaron Grace? And then we talked about it more that evening, and I just felt so moved by the Spirit to talk to Hunter one more time and see, because we, if you don't know, we have at the time a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old. Mm-hmm. And Hunter builds homes in Smyrna, and so like logistically tough. So I followed up with him. I got back from meeting with John. Everybody was out on the playground with the kids. We were about to go into our life group, and Hunter kept saying, well, what happened? And I was like, if I talk about it right this second, I will have an emotional breakdown. We're going to have to follow up after church. Let's just get through church. And so on the way home, he was trying to not ask, but was still asking just like some questions here and there. And we got home, we put the girls down, and he was like, okay, so where's this trip to? And I said, I cannot know until I sign on. Mm-hmm. And he was like, Hunter is such a planner. He is such a planner. Yep. And I'm not. So like, that's kind of a thrill for me, you know? And John had dropped some hints here and there that I probably could have figured out, but I thought, I don't want to make this decision based on where it is anyway. I would love for this to be an organic, I feel led, and Hunter's on board, and he is willing to let me go and serve and feel like he can handle it for 10 days without me, which he did, and he thrived, and he's dad of the year. But I really did have a whole 2.5 weeks of feeling like, man, that door is closed, and I understand that door is closed, but I wish it hadn't. Yeah. And then John called, and his actual words were, I don't feel like the door has closed on this yet. So, interesting time of how we all ended up there. And I it's so funny that Chip talked about feeling like he had concerns of how we were going to mesh. Our group message is called Grandpa Chip and the Kids.
Saying that Chip came out of his shell definitely would be an understatement, which is important for us. Like as we have team meetings and stuff, preparing to go on the trip, one of the big things is just to begin developing a relationship with one another, because you're going to be living with somebody for 7 to 10 days that you normally don't live with, and that causes you to get very close with people very quickly. But for a guy like Chip to be somebody who sensed he was a little bit more quiet and reserved and was concerned about engaging with people, when we got over there, it was the exact opposite. He was able to relate to people so quickly, so well, was able to jump into conversations and have a lot of spiritual conversations with people. So it was cool to even see a guy like him, his giftedness come out, not just his personality, which I could share similar stories for everybody on the team.
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome. Sean, for you, I know you've been on quite a few mission trips and have I've just seen your passion for mission even in the limited amount of time I've been here. But what was this? This is your first time to this area or to the Middle East, right?
It was.
What was this trip like for you? How did it differ from some of the other trips that you've been on?
Well, I was actually signed up to go to the England trip with the high schoolers up until about 2 weeks before the trip, 2 or 3 weeks. I was interning with Wesley here. He's like, hey, you should go to the Middle East. I was like, I'm already on the high school trip. And so we talked about it, and I ended up going to the Middle East, and it was fun. I say it was different because of the way the trip was set up would be the big thing. So I've been on a lot of where you go and build something for a mission trip.
Right. Yeah.
I've been on where you go and you're just evangelism. Like you're on street corners talking to people about Jesus, trying to get people to have a conversation. And this was a middle ground, I think.
Yeah.
So we went out every day and we had conversations, but we also were with the church planners, helping them feel comfortable, and they said how much they thanked us. But we also had a lot of time. We were like working at this home with refugees, just able to do things. Like I didn't think we had to clear a brush pile one day. Like, hey, we need that brush pile cleared, and it was pretty huge. And so that's what I did one whole day was I cleared a brush pile in the heat and got to interact with the refugee kids. And it's not what I thought I'd be doing that day. But it ended up working out really well. So I liked it, actually. I thought it was really cool. It was a different demographic than I'm used to.
Yeah.
I think it was very, very good. All God's people are the same. So it was one thing I saw was no matter where I'm at, that they're all acting the same, searching for the same stuff. And that was a big takeaway, I think, from the trip.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good stuff. Well, I'd love to hear it for anybody who wants to share. What was your favorite part of the trip as a whole, best part of the trip? That as you think about going to the Middle East, going to Cyprus, like what was the one thing that stands out for you?
I mean, I could absolutely go on and on and on about the fun we had and how wonderful it was to see all these guys in action, and to see them having these great and intentional conversations with people, and to have the intentional conversations even with our host family that was there, that we were there to support. I kind of on the same page as Sean. I have not been on a mission trip like this, but mine more so, and I've talked very openly about this, came from the structure. So I've only been on mission trips where it is like, I mean, to the minute, you've got a plan.
Yeah.
And John sent out an itinerary before we left, that the F family had sent to us. And it was like one activity a day, generally speaking.
Yeah.
And John said, I've never had this much structure for a mission trip. I was like, really? Because I've never had so little structure. And so I did have some concerns of like, man, I don't want to not fulfill a purpose here. I don't want to feel like I've had so many people rally behind me and support me through donations and through prayer and not feel like I am out here doing the work, you know? So something that really jumps out to me is like, possibly my favorite moment. We were riding with the F family to drop the husband off at work, and they just were going on, and was it just me in the car? It might have been. They were going on and on about how grateful they were that we were still willing to come to them when it was no longer the front lines, right? And they were no longer in a closed country, and that even though this is a lot different than it used to look like, that they still have a partner with Immanuel Baptist Church, and knowing that people are still loving them and praying for them and willing to come to them and serve alongside them. And like, so much so that the husband, as he was explaining this all to me, was getting emotional.
Yeah.
And I mean, just like a beautiful reminder of my plan means nothing. And we daily were in some type of situation that it was just, I think for all of us, a reminder of, this is not my plan.
Yeah.
And it does not matter what my plan is, because it's out of my hands.
Yep.
So I think that might have been like my absolute favorite moment, was just like such a God thing of a reminder of,
Yep.
you've got to let go of trying to feel like you're in control, or even just like, I don't know, feeling like what I want or what I envision for my purpose is so much different than
Right.
what is being envisioned for me.
Yeah. And that's not always easy. As a control, I can have a tendency to be a control freak at times. We'll say controller, but control freak may be a better,
Yep.
or just a planner in general.
Sure.
Like following the Lord's lead is sometimes challenging. You mentioned the F family a few times. John, this is your second time. Have you been, prior to last year, worked with this family before?
Yeah, I've known them for a decade. So they
Okay.
were in a small group that I led when I was in seminary.
Yeah.
And then got to be a part of them going over and filling out some applications and doing some references and stuff with them. So it's cool to be able to be partnered with them now. The last trip that we sent in last year here at Immanuel is the first church that I've been at that we've actually partnered with them, though, officially. So.
That's awesome. So yeah, and we say the F family to not throw their name out there for I guess kind of for privacy protection reasons, but they're our partners that are over there. So I'd love to hear last year they were not in Cyprus, so that's why it was the Middle East trip, to kind of keep their location protected a little bit, but. I'd love to just hear, like, why is it so secretive? Why can we not just say their names and say where you went last year and let people know all that stuff?
Yeah, so where they were previously in the Middle East was a closed country. So Cameron mentioned that already. A closed country means that it's okay for you to be a Christian in those countries. They honestly expect that because we're Americans that we are Christians. What's not okay for them would be to try to convince someone to change their religion. So in most Middle Eastern countries, whenever you're born, like on your birth certificate, it says you're a Muslim. That's just very a part of their culture and their identity and who it is that they are. And so because of that, whenever you're going to serve in a country like that, long term, they have to have a business platform. They just can't shout from the mountaintops, hey, I'm a missionary, here's a Bible, come to Jesus.
Right.
They just do very relational work with trying to meet people as they're out and about, as they're working. And so it's slow work a lot of times, but the Lord brought fruit. So like in the city that they were in before in the Middle East, they were not aware of a person who had come to faith who was from that background until they got there. They met a lady, were able to baptize her, which is such a big deal for a Muslim background person, because not only are they saying, yes, I'm following Jesus, but they're also turning away from their family, from their identity, from their culture in many ways. And so it's a very big deal whenever they profess faith and then whenever they take the step to be baptized. So their last location that they were in went from not only unreached, but it was also unengaged, which means that they had not even been engaged with the gospel. And so it was beautiful for us to be able to see that kind of work. But because of that, they still have a lot of relationships where they were previously. And so to protect those relationships, both the believers that are from that area as well as their long-term workers, it's just not worth it for us to share their names and what location they're in. So while Cyprus is European, it's much more open. It was incredible to see how open it was. We just want to protect their relationships long-term and the fruit they were able to see long-term.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, because I think that was like, especially the wife of the family, the night that these boys be playing cards around that table till 2 a.m. That night, it was like she was getting message after message after message about, I mean, by the time we were leaving, I think it was up to 6 families that they were serving alongside of in their old country, in the closed country, that had been blacklisted and were told you have until the end of the month to relocate. And she just kept going on and on and especially like on the front end of the trip, she was very open about, we just felt called to go ahead. I mean, they'd spent 8 years in their previous location, and they were called to leave and take on a new role. And she was very open with us about, and we don't really know what that looks like yet, so we're glad that you are here. I think John was mentioning earlier that we did a lot of trying to figure out what serving could look like for them, because they are in a different role and they don't necessarily have like this business front that they are working through anymore, although it was at the time, don't know where the progress is now on it, it was still functioning in the closed country they were living in with these people running it. Those people were starting to seemingly be picked off by the government and being told you can't be here. And so that night she was like, it's when the Lord reveals himself, he reveals himself. Right. So we had no idea what this was going to look like. We just felt called that it was our time to go to the next place. And now here we are. And we see these families being told you've got to leave. And we didn't hit that point. And like, how awesome that we were out in the nick of time. Yeah. Right. And so I don't know. And that was another way that I felt like I had great relation building with her. At night, whenever we could, we'd go over to their house, play cards, act like heathens. And she and I would just talk on the couch. And we talked a lot about what things could look like in Cyprus for them and like how they could get plugged in. And so one night we were having a conversation just like that about how they could be functioning where they're at, and they still have a heart for this business that is in their closed country that they were previously located in. And the next day we went out to a market and we're walking around. But as we're trying to wrangle everybody up from getting their souvenirs, Chip, Chip, where's Chip? She wandered into a store. Their business is making soaps. Yeah. And she wandered into a store that was like very holistic and natural and organic body needs. And she had made a connection with the owner about what it could look like to put their products there. And then one day while we were at, I think our last day while we were at the Learning Refuge, it took a turn into a conversation of, well, how could we get these Syrian refugee women involved and how can we help them raise money? Because that was their mission, was how can we get these women to produce some type of product and then sell it. Oftentimes that's around Christmas time, and most of that money goes right back to those women and to their families and to helping them. But it was just a conversation that like I saw, I don't know, just like completely unfold throughout the 10 days that we were there, starting so early when they were telling us about the business model that they had, and then transforming into these people are still running it, and then transformed into, well, now these people are being told they have to leave. Yeah. Then being transformed into, how could this look here? And then I like just seeing it all come to life and like hearing the excitement and the joy that it was bringing her, and her expressing that she is seeing and understanding the purpose and like the fulfillment of this plan. It was just really cool to see. Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. You said something about looking for Chip, and Chip being, where is Chip? It's like that seemed to be a common theme of the trip. Very much a unspoken game of, have you seen Chip?
Old Chippy.
I didn't know they were doing all this whole time.
I know. We were looking for you. You were nowhere to be found.
On the post-trip podcast, you learn all the secrets.
Oh, man. Where's Chip?
That's funny.
I was looking for
everything.
Sometimes too.
Everything. Chip brought an extra suitcase that had basically nothing in it, and then came home full.
It was very full.
Came home full. Yeah. And then, I think, if I'm not mistaken, let's toot his horn a little bit. You gave a lot of your clothes to the Learning Refuge. You have more room for souvenirs.
He just had to make room in his bag for souvenirs. Yeah.
There's a plan for that.
Yeah. No, that was very kind. There's a lot of favorite parts of the trip. A lot of them just have to do with us laughing with each other, engaging with our partners, fun card games and those types of things. But I think the most impactful thing that I saw, so this is my 5th time going to the Middle East. I love I just love Muslim people. They're just hospitable, so kind. Religion comes up very naturally in conversation. Love learning from them, love talking to them. But I've never been to a Middle Eastern country. I've never engaged with a Muslim people group that was more open in conversation than these people. So
that's awesome.
Sean mentioned earlier, one day he unexpectedly, him and Wesley, cleaned a big brush pile. And the guy that helped come to we mentioned the refuge center several times in conversation already, a lady about whenever the Syrian refugee crisis started, I guess that was over 10 years ago at this point, a lady recognized that a lot of Syrian refugees were coming to Cyprus, but they had no community and no one was sensing to engage them. So she basically started this refugee center where they seek to give them community, they seek to train them on things, they engage the women and the men, and they're doing a lot of really faithful work. So we actually got to get partnered up with them on the last few days of the trip. So Sean and Wesley clean up this brush pile, and the guy that comes to help them take the brush pile to the dump or the trash wherever they needed to take it was a Syrian refugee guy. They get to talking to him in the car, end up inviting him to dinner that night. So we all have dinner with him that night. The next day he says, do you guys want to get coffee? So we had plans to get coffee that afternoon. We're out at the mall getting lunch and prepping for the day, and we couldn't find our way back to our car in the parking garage. The guys were. So we walked around trying to find the staircase, the escalator that we came up, and we just couldn't find it. So we're like, all right, we're just going to go to the end, then we'll make our way back. We get on the escalator to head down, and who do we pass but the Syrian refugee guy that we had met the day before that we had coffee plans that afternoon. So that morning in our trip devotional, it was Isaiah passage where it talks about how God was showing his mighty arm. And I was just like, dude, God, you're flexing right now. This is awesome. So we got to talk to the guy. He got our coffee order, was all excited. We went and had coffee with him that afternoon. Was actually able to get into a spiritual conversation, learn more about his beliefs, share the gospel with him that afternoon. He not only came, but he also invited his family to come. So he introduced us to his cousin, his aunt. We got in a good conversation with them. By the end of the conversation, they're all trying to invite us over to a cookout at their house. We were leaving that night, so we were oh, we're so sorry. But they were oh, please, are you coming back next time? Please come back. That would make us so happy. We ended up connecting them with our partners, and I'm sure they've had it already, but they had lined up a cookout where our partners were going to cook American food and they were going to cook Syrian food.
Oh, yeah.
So that all came from an unexpected cleaning up a backyard of brush to just meeting up with this guy and then his family a couple days on a couple of occasions. And so it was just amazing to see their desire for community interaction and their openness to the gospel, which shouldn't be a surprise because they're displaced from their community. They're displaced from a lot of their belief system. So a lot of times Muslim people will go to the mosque every single day, multiple times a day. They only go once a day. There's not really a lot around. There's not a lot of restaurants around. They're kind of ostracized in the culture in many ways. So it's not a surprise that they're longing for community and relationship. It's also not a surprise that they're longing for what will ultimately satisfy them because they've been running after so many things and they realize it's never going to satisfy them how they hoped it would. So that was pretty impactful. I still just get excited thinking about those conversations and thinking about our teams going back in the future and just what an open door they're going to have to having gospel conversations with people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I was going to say, I was thinking about the same story that you just talked about. All about one of my favorite parts of the whole trip was that. Yeah. Of the man, and we ultimately got to share the gospel with, and ended up having dinner one night and coffee. So that was really neat.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So the man I wasn't the biggest fan of at first.
The other side of the story.
Just to be honest. Well, so we get there and it's hot, and they're telling us, hey, clear this brush pile. So we clear it. And then they're like, hey, the man will be here later. So I'm like, okay, we hang out for a while. We have other plans. So we have to leave. They said, come back this afternoon. He'll be here. Well, we get back that afternoon, and we wait there for about 3 hours, and he never showed up. And then he texts, hey, yeah, I'm not going to make it. So in this time, my plan was, hey, we're going to load this brush pile, get this over with. And instead, I'm in sewing in a room, playing with a floppy-eared cat. Yeah. I'm not the biggest fan of cats, but I was playing with this cat, and my eyes were getting itchy, and everybody's sewing, and I'm like, this is definitely not what I had planned for today. But you know what? I'm serving God's people. Yeah. And then in that day before he showed up, while we're waiting on him, we actually get to pray over a man who spoke no English. Yeah. So he had a back injury and wasn't able to work. He was a refugee. And he realizes that we're Americans, that we're probably Christians, like John was saying earlier. They assume that we're Christians, and said, hey, can y'all pray for healing over me? Can you ask to pray for healing? And for somebody from a devout Muslim background to be asking us for prayer, knowing who we're going to be praying to, it just showed how desperate he was for healing. So we got to pray over him and kind of lay hands on him and pray, and he was very open to it. Not sure how much he understood of it, but we get to pray over him, so I thought that was pretty cool. Then, of course, the next day, they're like, hey, the man will be back here tomorrow. And I was like, yeah, sure he will. Then he showed up, and we got to ride with him, and we got in trouble for where we put the debris and stuff in the pile. And on the way back, I'm like, this is awkward. We just got in trouble and chewed out. I don't know much Greek, but that dude was not happy. So it's kind of awkward. He's just laughing it off. The refugee who was driving us was. So then I'm like, Wesley, I'm going to get my phone out. We're going to use Google Translate. So we're going to ask him what his favorite food is. So we asked him. So as he's driving, we're showing him our phone. He's trying to read Google Translate while he's bopping and weaving between traffic. And he goes, oh, I love seafood. This is my favorite place. And so I was like, Wesley, let's ask him if we're going to eat there tomorrow. So Wesley asked him, and he goes out and eats with us that night. Yeah. And then we made that whole connection, and he invites us to coffee. So wasn't the biggest fan of his at first because he was so late. I thought he was never going to show up. But actually, we still stay in touch. He actually messaged me yesterday and was talking to me. So
that's awesome.
But wasn't the biggest fan at first, but God's plan worked out. We ended up getting to pray for somebody since we were there. Yeah. And then met him.
So. That's awesome.
I also thought it was incredible just because we did get plugged in with this, I guess, like mini community even of Syrian refugees who are all Arabic-speaking people. And, like, just seeing the Lord's goodness of putting us where we needed to be, putting the F family where they needed to be, because they came from a country that was Arabic speaking where they lived for 8 years and they were fluent in the language. And like when the husband would go out and would speak to these men that spoke Arabic and he's speaking in their native tongue, or when the wife was doing that at the refuge center, I mean, like the faces of these refugees were just, they were elated that someone else spoke the way they spoke and that they could understand and didn't necessarily need a translator, although those people were translating for us. But they were able to engage in conversation and like have good conversation. And you could so see that filling both of their cups, right? This community of Syrian refugees, as well as our host family that we were there to support. Yeah. So that was another thing that I just thought, because they hadn't really, the F family, they hadn't really engaged too much their daughter, who is now in the States for college, over the summer. After they had just kind of moved and gotten settled, she was volunteering there some. So the husband and wife, they hadn't done a whole bunch or really gotten plugged in. Yeah. So we got to see that unfolding in real time and like see how they were starting to consider what could that partnership look like for them. So it was so neat because I mean, especially here, you think, who speaks Arabic? Right. You know, not many people. And the same thing there. I'm sure that these Syrian people are thinking, no one understands me. Yeah. They don't understand what I'm going through. They literally do not understand what I'm saying. Mm. And then you have these white people just walk up and start speaking Arabic to you. Like, what a nice God thing to say. Flex. A flex, if you will. He's flexing. Bearing that arm. Yeah. Bearing that arm.
That's awesome. Mm. And all these stories, just testaments to God's faithfulness when we want to control, we want to have the plan like you were talking about. We want to know what we're doing and when we're doing it. But sometimes when we just release that and just allow him to lead us where we need to go, even when it's frustrating, but staying faithful ourselves to that mission, and then allowing him to do what only he can do. So that's awesome. You've mentioned a few times a lot of Muslims in this area. When our New York team shared, there's a lot of Bengali Muslims in that area, and we were talking a little bit about, and you mentioned it briefly, John, but just the openness that they have to conversations about religion. I think in America we have this perception of Muslim people that we think of the terrorists, we think of the attacks, we think of them as very aggressive people that don't want to have conversations with us, and if they do, like they're just completely opposed to everything that we do. What was it like being in? Because I think it's easy for people to think, well, you were in you may have been dealing with these people, but you're also in America, so it's probably different. Was it any different there? Are they aggressive people? And what was it like doing ministry over there with people who we see as terrorists, aggressive,
Well, I would just say they're very hospitable.
Yeah.
So we've used that word a lot. But they're just open to talk. They're very nice. They're very kind. And they'll give you everything they have as kind of a sign of respect for you. So I was just thinking, he invited us to coffee. We couldn't make it to coffee because he canceled. He said, Inshallah, I think, which means, if the Lord wills, we'll be there on time. So I was like, man, we're gonna get coffee eventually. But he DoorDashed, I think, what was it? How many, like 13 or 14 coffees for us because he didn't know exactly what we wanted.
Yeah.
And he didn't know how many of us would be there. So he had an abundance of coffee that he spent his own money on for us just because he was like, hey, I said I'll bring coffee. Well, I'll bring coffee.
Yeah.
So he went above and beyond to kind of do that. And then right after that, we ate with him, then he gave us coffee. He was like, hey, tomorrow we're going to have a cookout. Can you come to the cookout? My whole family's going to be there. We're all cook. We're going to bring Syrian food. Y'all have some American food. Bring what you want. So then, we're invited into his community, into his home, meeting all of his family. And he had just met us 2 days earlier, very briefly, with broken conversation. So I think that's just a testament to how willing they are just to accept you in and take you in because they don't really, doesn't matter where you're from. So, hey, we're just going to care for you.
That's awesome.
And I think that the only times I saw a bit of a different side because I was working with the women. Yeah. The only time you ever, I don't want to use the word like hostility, but very defensive, and protective because I can only imagine feeling the need to flee my home and get out of the country, how on the defense I would be. So, for example, the last day that we were there, we did a type of clothing drive. And I mean, these people are in need. There's a real need in this community. They can't, so the way it was kind of explained to me is they can't get citizenship. They have to get approved for basically refugee status, but the government in Cyprus is moving so slow doing that oftentimes they are being like completely vetoed and you got to either reapply or get out before anything can really take way. So these people are desperate. Their husbands can't work. They can't work. They have kids they have to take care of, but these kids also have to be in these schools, but these schools have to have uniforms. And it's just like this vicious cycle of being in need and feeling this visceral, I can only imagine, but as a mom, a visceral need to try to provide for and care for your family and protect them. And so like the last day when we were doing this clothing drive, I'm holed up in a tight little room that has all of these uniforms for these kids, and there are clothes outside like laid out on different tables. Everybody is needing shoes for their children, and like the winter months coming, and how can we get these kids warm clothes? And I mean, at first it was I've packed a bag for this specific family. That was something that was incredible to see. Was the woman that runs that refuge center knows these families by name, and I mean knows what they need, knows what sizes they are, and like she can recall a lot of them and has them written down, and it's like organized chaos to say the least. But at first it was I'm making a bag, I'm handing it out, I'm making a bag, I'm handing it out, and then these families are starting to come into this like very small room, smaller than this room I'd say, and hotter, and like I start seeing it's a little less of, hey, I'm looking for this or whatever, and there is a translator that's kind of helping them along and turning. You can just tell, I mean, obviously body language is universal. You can tell that it's starting to get a little bit more agitated and a little bit more, I need this. And it's obvious that it wasn't from a place of like being, wanting to be ugly or wanting to be demanding, but from a place of being on the defense and feeling like they've been on the defense for so long and just taking hit after hit, trying to flee from their country, trying to figure out a new home, trying to provide for their families and for their kids and even for their husbands that can't work or can't find legal work, or if they have found work, maybe it not being completely like kosher everywhere. So I feel like the men really did get to see this very hospitable side. And I saw that as well. I did see that as well. But I also saw a side of some of these women that I only thought was a defense mechanism of like, I have got to do what I've got to do to get by because that's what I've been doing for so long. Yeah. And so it's easy to see some of these people being jaded from all of the obstacles they've had to go through. But then it leads them to these awesome conversations of, these people are here, I bet they're Christians, and I want their prayers for healing of my back. And I might not be able to understand, but if you could relay this to them. And we did. We all stood in there and laid hands on this man, and we prayed over him. And it was really, really awesome. And Wesley, even that night, he just kept saying, and it has so resonated with me, of how amazing is it that he thought so highly of our God and our prayer. Yep. That he wanted us to do that for him. And I agree. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's so cool. Chip, you mentioned when you were thinking about mission trips in general, the Middle East was the last place you wanted to go. Yeah. Was the whole just general idea that we have in America of Muslims and what that looks like, that play part?
It was that. Yeah. It was everything that you see on TV, everything that all the horrible things that you see, and you see, I know I've watched, and you see Christians lined up on a beach and just have their life ended right there. And that, that scares you. Yeah. And you think, is it going to be like that? And am I willing to do that if it comes to this case? And in that case, and I would hope so. Yeah. It's still scary. And I even before the day before we were to fly out, I remember calling John, and I was like, and I had people coming up to my work said, "You don't need to go. I think this is a bad idea, Chip. I'm really concerned about you. You really don't need to be going," because at the time Iran was shooting over into Israel, and I mean, I know where we're going, but I don't know how far that is from. Right. So I'm mapping it out. Wow, that's really close. I said, wow, and I'm like, man, maybe they're right, but I'm like, I want to go. So I'm a little nervous. I had like two or three guys really come up and said, I just really fear for you. I just really don't. I think this is a good idea. And I'm like, God wants me here. I know that. I really felt called to go. And I finally just told him. I said, God, I said, look, I appreciate your concern. I really do, but I'm still going, and I am. And I did call John. Yeah. I was a little nervous about it, but, I have to say, I've been to several other countries that were probably more dangerous. Yeah, wow. This is probably maybe even the safest country I felt going to. I never, not once, felt in danger. Wow. Not once. It was very safe, and I felt at home. Yeah. I mean, everybody was just like Carly said, and Sean, it is so hospitable, so nice, and just so friendly to see us, and it just made everything just wonderful.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, typically when our yes is on the table and God's about to move, Satan wants to do everything he can to take away from that. Yeah. And so, we shouldn't be surprised when people come up and you shouldn't go, and we have those doubts and questions.
Exactly. I can't tell you how many times I've probably talked to John. And John would say, you probably.
Me and Chippy got a little close pre-trip. There was a lot of calls.
I was like, man.
2 a.m. Chip's calling me.
I'd rather somebody call than not call, though, and just be isolated.
But I was calling John probably several times during this whole thing. I'm like, I just don't really feel like I need to go here, Called.
Does anyone have any fears? And the rest of us are sitting, and Chip's like, well, I got to tell you.
I've got everything, and everybody else like, oh, we're good. I'm like, well, man, well, not me. but that quickly went away. Even on the plane flight over, I had a man. Me and Wesley we talked and everything, and it was just a funny story. I'm dead tired, and I'm just being. This is off subject. Plain food is not the best sometimes. So I'm eating, and Wesley's over there, and I'm just tired. I'm just eating just to eat. So I like snacks. So, but anyhow, we had something. It was potatoes and some weird meatloaf or something. I don't know what it was, but I did not know at the time there were like mushrooms buried under the potatoes. And I'm not a fan of mushrooms. I just really don't like mushrooms. Yeah. So I'm like half asleep, and I just put what I thought was a potato in my mouth, and it was a mushroom. I'm like, oh, that was horrible. Of course, Wesley's over laughing at me.
Yeah.
Everything like that. But yeah, that was just some of the neat stories, the little, the thing that, the chip pills.
That was a tame story.
That was a very tame story. But it was just on the way over here. But that was kind of broke the ice, I guess, for me. So, yeah.
That's awesome.
I would also like to tell a funny story. We had the sleepy ha-has this night for sure. I think it was like 1 a.m. First of all, nope, Chip is driving, and you drive on the wrong side of the road and the wrong side of the car. And I mean, first of all, barely escaped with our lives on this drive. It was awesome for some people. We make it back closer, I suppose, to our side of town. And Wesley, never seen one of these in the wild, but a hedgehog runs out in front of the car. And Wesley, first of all, screams, "A hedgehog! Stop the car!" Kind of thinking it was going to end there. He didn't want to hit it. And then he said, "My sister loves hedgehogs." And again, we had the sleepy ha-ha, so it's even funnier in the moment. But he is like, "My sister loves hedgehogs. We got to get it." And he's giddy over this hedgehog. We keep going because obviously we're not going to get a live animal and take it back with us. Yeah. You weren't as giddy, you're correct, as you're driving, and you'd almost hit a couple people, so I can imagine.
He was pretty giggly.
He was kind of giggly still, though. And then we make it around the corner. We're getting much closer to our place, and there are lights, beautiful lights strong. I'm assuming it was like a wedding ceremony, and there's a live band, and I say, "A live band? We should stop. Let's listen to some music. It's 1 a.m. anyway. Y'all have kept me up way past my bedtime anyway. Let's stop and listen to some music." And Wesley whips around to me, and I mean, pretty in my face even, and says, "If I don't get a hedgehog, you don't get a live band." And just turns back around and keeps on keeping on. I was like, wow. And truth. And so both of those things, though, made it onto my list of funny things people say that I get a giggle out of. And I love reflecting back on those.
That's awesome.
Trying to drive on the other side of the road was a little challenge for the first couple of days.
Sure. Yeah, I bet.
But you are a fearless leader that did such. And John did it a couple of times. I wasn't going to.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, one of the common themes with all of our trips, but just with mission trips in general, is when you spend a week, this was a little bit more than a week, but when you spend a week with a few people, you tend to grow in relationship a little bit. You get closer to each other. You learn a lot about each other. So maybe sometimes too much about people. But there are. I've loved hearing these stories because you've got the things that God did. You've got the challenges in the midst of it. But then you've got the fun times as well. I did. Somebody mentioned a cat, and I hear there's another nickname for Chip that we have not mentioned yet.
Oh my goodness!
Shabe Abu Kata.
Yeah,
so that is
we learned in a different language.
Arabic for old man cat daddy. So Shabe Abu Kata is what our refugee friend gave us, because Cyprus is known for their cats. Stray cats everywhere. Like one time we were eating dinner, and a stray cat we're on this outdoor area. The roof is grapevines, and this cat from the street takes off, climbs up, and the people come out from the kitchen, start throwing rocks at it, trying to get it off.
Spraying.
We're just sitting there like we're eating. They start spraying it with water, and then it starts running towards our place. So I start covering my food. I'm like, this cat's not landing in my food. And they chase it out into the street, got it gone. They go, dinner and a show. But we realized that if there was a cat, it was around Chip. The cats followed Chip. We had a cat at the place we stayed. There was a cat. They said they didn't have a cat, but there was a cat house outside.
That's specifically on a piece
Yes.
of paper.
We do
This
not
is
own
not
that.
our cat.
This is not our cat, but they had
There's
a
a
house, food, whatever.
What do we
named
name
it
it?
Tom.
Tom,
It
yeah.
was Tomcat.
So,
Tomcat.
And like in the mornings, you would look. I mean, my room. The boys graciously gave me the room that had a balcony. In my room, I could walk out in the mornings and I'd see Chip downstairs doing his Bible study, sometimes on the
Snuggled up
phone,
on the couch
and the
with
cat in his
The
lap.
cat would be in my lap while I was reading.
And he's just like, sitting with the cat in his lap. He's like flipping his Bible pages, the cat in his lap. He's talking on the phone, the cat's in his lap, and every now and then he's petting it a little bit.
And there is a picture of this, so I'll be sure to flash this up on the video if you're watching
Don't
it.
remember when Chip ran out that door.
I wasn't gonna bring that up. I wasn't gonna bring that up.
Yeah, we can. That's all right.
You
We
know
can say
the
that.
you know
I ran
the,
into a door.
the ads for Windex where birds went into the windows.
was a
Chip
screen
bold
door.
face ran
Well,
into a screen.
I was just
He
right
walked
into it.
right into the door, and then he goes, "That was dumb. Even the cat's not that dumb." Then he just opens the door and walks
Yeah, the
in.
cat never did that.
Cat never did that.
Goodness.
That's hilarious. That's awesome. One of the biggest things that like my big focus when I go on mission trips and lead mission trips and just hear about these things is the mission trip is great. The week that we're there, there's a lot of stories. There's a lot of benefit for ministry, for supporting our partners, for whatever that happens on the field. But also, I think to an extent, if we just leave it at that, then in a lot of ways we miss the mark because God's doing a work in our lives. Part of it is just taking the step to go on the trip. I think both of y'all shared that of like all the doubts and ways that Satan tries to come and detract from what God wants to do. But then when we step into that, we see our faith growing in that. But also ways that we can bring it back, I think is so huge. So what are some ways, just to kind of close us off, what are some ways that that a trip like this, you guys spending this week together, the fun stories, the challenging things, the things that you saw God do, what are some ways that you've been able to take the experience that you had in Cyprus and bring them back into Wilson County and see impact here?
I say one of the main ways and main things I got from it is so I work with high schoolers often. So I work here with the students, and I'm a high school teacher. So oftentimes I can get very frustrated with people very quickly just because I see like they kind of get on my nerves, as y'all saw with the one man showing up a day late. I was kind of frustrated. But I think at this trip, kind of being with everybody taught me that we need to kind of, all people are the same. Mm-hmm. They're all looking for the same stuff, and they all struggle with the same thing, which is sin overall. So if we look at it through that lens of we're all forgiven and we all make mistakes and we're all at some point probably going to be a day late when we said we were going to be there a day before, that just cut people some grace, because these people were going through a lot. Like I was frustrated with that man, and then I realized that he was working 2 jobs and then picked up an extra shift that night because he was doing, I think it was roofing that day, doing some shingles. So I think just being patient with everybody, and we're all going through the same stuff. We're all searching for the same stuff, and we're all trying our best most of the time. So just kind of, that changed my perspective on people a little bit. A big thing, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think I said earlier in the podcast that we engaged predominantly with Greek Cypriots, with retirees from the UK, with tourists from Europe, and with Syrian refugees. Yeah. And what we found very quickly in engaging with all of them is all of them were searching for something. They were oftentimes searching for escape or satisfaction in some way. And all of them found that they were just never going to be satisfied by whatever they were running after. Mm. And so the Greek Cypriots are looking for a way of life and oftentimes trying to run against the stigma that Cyprus has with just the Turkish conflict. The UK retirees were looking for rest and respite after living their whole lives, and they wanted to come back to the place that they had dreams of when they served in the military in Cyprus back in the day. The European tourists were looking for just a good time and a party and a beautiful location, and the Syrian refugees were looking from escape and refuge from a war-torn country. Mm-hmm. And so all of them were seeking and searching for something, and yet they're running after it in all the wrong ways. Mm-hmm. And so it's almost like if you go and you engage with somebody who lives in like a tourist area or like a beach town in the United States, a lot of times it's like amazing when you get in a conversation with them that they just seem kind of like depressed. Mm-hmm. You're like, man, you're in this beautiful location. You get to work here every day. How on earth can you be depressed? The people in Cyprus were so very similar. They were all seeking for something, all searching for something, and they just kept wanting more, and they were never going to find it. And so for us to be able to come and give the answer, it was like, man, I'm in Europe right now. I'm in this beautiful island. The Mediterranean Ocean is just gorgeous, as blue and clear as it can be. And yet all of these people have the same exact problem. It's the same problem that people have in Lebanon if they aren't followers of Jesus. They're just seeking for their satisfaction, for their identity, for their worth in all the wrong places. Mm-hmm. And they're always going to be left wanting more. So for us to engage with every single person, we're in Europe, but every person we engage with outside of our partners or the people they went to church with is just as lost as every person was that I've engaged in the Middle East in closed countries. And we have the hope. Yep. It gave me fresh eyes into who I engage with every day here. Mm-hmm. What they're searching for and what they're trying to find their satisfaction in might look a little different. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that they're never going to find it apart from Christ. Yeah. And so it spurred me on to be more intentional in conversations, realizing, man, I have the hope. And it's not because of anything I've done. It's just because Jesus worked in my life. And so I need to be more faithful to cast the seed as wide as I can and then see God bring the fruit, much like I did every single day in Cyprus. And just seeing the ways that the Lord is flexing his arm even here. Yeah. Because he's barring his holy arm. He's sovereign. He's in control in Lebanon. And he's working in some incredible ways if we just had eyes to see it and a willingness to be a part of it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I think it's an amazing thing to experience the boldness that you do on a mission trip and being so brave as to step out of your comfort zone, because you kind of have the mindset of, what do I have to lose? Yeah, I don't know these people. Eventually I'm going to go home and I'm going to be back in my comfort zone, mm-hmm. and I can just be here and be bold in the name of the Lord. And it really gives a whole new meaning to the harvest is plenty, but the laborers are few. Mm-hmm. And how dare I go overseas with a boldness that I am not willing to do here? Yeah. And especially also as a high school teacher, that's my mission field, and we battle the separation of church and state every day, but how am I not living out this boldness that I was so willing to do in a different country when I am comfortable with these people? Yeah. And they are the people that I interact with and engage with every single day, and they are who I feel like the Lord has put in my life and put in my path to be the face of Jesus for, yep. And to just make disciples and make more laborers. Yep. So that's definitely something that has come home with me and that I think about quite often.
That's great.
Well, I guess I have to kind of second everyone on that. The same thing. Going there and being bold and sharing there, but what can I do here? Yeah. What can I do at my work? I work around, I'm in a plumbing field and work around a lot of people that are construction people. I'm over a lot of them, and they're looking at me, and it's brought new light to me as far as everyday life. Mm-hmm. My job, I'm sure y'all's also, could be very stressful, and sometimes you don't want to just blurt out anything and get upset. Right. You got to really watch yourself every day, because people are watching you. Yep. Every single day they're watching you. Are you who you say you are? Mm-hmm. And they're looking for you to stumble. And so I pray that every day that, yes, on the way into work, that I can be who God intends for me to be and shine his light no matter what, everywhere I go. And I pray for opportunities just like there in Cyprus, opportunities at work, opportunities at wherever I go, that I will get to, share the gospel with someone, even if it's just a little bit. They take maybe a little bit every now and then, but they grab hold of it. And I have seen a little bit of difference since I've been back, not only myself, but even as some guys that work with me. And that means a lot, even if it's just a small little bit. Yeah. So, yeah. And I want to say something. on my first mission trip, and it's something that got me go to my very first mission trip, and something that sticks with me, and anybody else also that might want to go but is scared to go. I remember the first time I was called. It was a little island called Providence, and it's owned by Columbia. It's a little bitty, super small island, and at the time, I thought I was going to be going to a different mission trip with all my buddies. They were going to Cuba.
Yeah.
And I've been there a few times too, but this time, it reminded me of something similar here, my very first trip. It was a sermon that was preached, and I couldn't tell you anything about the whole sermon but one line. But one line that has stuck out with me, and I've said it just about every one of these I've been on, and the preacher said, "Don't let fear get in the way of what God has planned for you." And it has stuck with me ever since, because that was exactly what kept me from going, and it's what still almost keeps me from going. But I still remember that line. It's fear of the unknown.
Yep.
But God's always taking care of it.
Yeah.
And it's always been Him doing it, all the work, and nothing I've done.
Yeah.
I don't get any of the credit. It's always Him, and He owe Him all the glory, all the honor.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what has always stuck in my mind when I get in these situations.
Yeah.
Remember that.
Absolutely.
So.
Yeah. That's great. I was actually going to, at the end, I want to ask one more question before we go, but I was actually going to ask you at the end, what would you say to someone who's wanting to go but maybe having doubts? So there, you answered it.
Yeah, it was fear for me.
Yeah.
And sometimes it creeps up still.
Yeah.
But I've always tried to make that a part of it.
Yeah.
And we'll tell people, hey, don't let that keep you from going, because He's going to do incredible things that you won't even, that you'll look back and like, wow, what did I just say?
Yeah.
I remember I've said so many things and I don't even remember saying it.
Yeah.
And that's just how God works.
That's awesome. Good stuff. Well, yeah, one last thing, just for our people that are listening, what are some ways that we can be praying for our partners there, be praying for the ministry that's happening there? If maybe even someone who's not able to go on this trip or is thinking about it, what are some ways that we can be praying for our partners that are in Cyprus, for the F family?
So I'm going to jump in because of the intentional conversation that the wife and I had about their business front.
Yeah.
One of the nights that we were talking about it, she mentioned sometimes it feels like the door's closing and that the Lord is ending that chapter.
Yeah. But
then it just barely opens back up, and I feel like they both do such a great job with discernment.
Yeah.
And she really, on multiple occasions, she asked for specific prayer that they are led of what to do with this business front, because it is successful. And like even churches in the States are still reaching out and saying, we have a church bookshop, we'd love to carry your products. And so she was like, we want to know what this looks like and how this role could still be a role that is utilized, but what that would have to look like because of our logistics now. He is working in a different job that is more of a structured office position, and she is in a place where she now has her foot in the door with a small business there in Cyprus, and she has her foot in the door with the refugee center, and she has openings with different churches in the States. And she talked about what it could look like even for a rebranding to make this about the Syrian women that could potentially be making these products. And like there were so many, it was a vision and the planning of the vision. And she specifically said we could just so desperately use prayer for how can this be a way for us to still serve.
Yeah. That's awesome. Anything else? Yeah, John, I know you have a closer relationship with them personally, so anyways we can be.
Yeah, I've reached out to them a few times since we've been back and asked this question specifically. So they've moved to a new country a few months ago when they've been living somewhere else for 8-9 months. And so if we think moving to a new house or new part of town is difficult, that's a whole nother world. And so going from a closed country to a European country is very different from them. I mean, they have, in a lot of positive ways, they have a evangelical church that they get to go to and that they can do ministry with. And so they're just continuing to seek those closer relationships with people, much like we would when we're moving to a new town, who they can really be living life with and a little more vulnerable and have trust with. And so they're looking for those people, and the Lord's already brought them some of them. Their kids, as we've already mentioned, one of them's in school in the States, the other one's in school in Germany, and so it's the first time that they're kind of empty nesters, and so they're learning a new rhythm of that personally, but also just wanting to continue to be involved in their kids' life and care for them while being in a different country is unique, and so they feel those burdens uniquely as well. And I think for them, they're looking for just what their ministry looks like there. We were able to open a lot of doors with them through the Refuge Center, which they were really thankful for with the Syrian population particularly. But they've got a day-to-day 9-to-5 kind of job. But what does it look like for them to be ambassadors of Jesus there, particularly among Muslim background people that they just have such a passion and such experience in? And so just looking for those ends, much like the Refugee Center, of how they can get in and engage that community more effectively.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's good stuff. Thank you guys for taking time today to share, but also for taking the time and making the commitment to go on this trip, because I know taking time away from family, from work, taking time off work to do something like this is a big ask for a lot of people. So thank you for making that commitment, for doing what God's called us all to do. And I love hearing these stories of God's faithfulness through that and answered prayers and how He's continuing to use you guys. So, we'll definitely continue to pray for the F family, to pray for you guys. But yeah, thank you guys so much for going. And for all of you who are thinking about going, this is a great trip. All the stuff is open now for applications and everything. So you can check that out at, I think if you go to immanuelbaptist.com/GOvember,
or /mission trips.
There you go.
Or the app.
Mission Trips is even better. Or the app, yes.
I normally give people immanuelbaptist.com/mission trips because GOvember
because that goes straight to it. Yeah.
Go straight to the page. Yeah. Communications.
Yeah, exactly. Go apply today. But thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll see y'all on the next one.